Hi, I'm Joe Fisher. Today I'm going to show you how I solder this 1/2-inch pipe thread fitting into a stainless steel vessel. We'll start by making a hole. It's easier to start it where the stainless has support, which is why I turned it over and put it over my vise. You can see I'm using a step drill bit here. They're designed specifically for working in sheet metal. They make nice clean holes. A little lubricant is always a good idea to help keep the bit cool and cutting easily. I'm using WD-40 here. Now this vessel is a lot thinner than a keg or a kettle, so you're going to notice it cuts very quickly. I'm shooting for 7/8 of an inch, so I'm going to check to make sure I didn't overshoot yet. And we're done. I'll run the bit around the inside just to help clear any burrs. Now I'll use my Dremel tool to further clean any burrs or pointy spots or any place where cracks can form, really. And I'll plug it in first. Now that we have a nice clean hole, and I'm done playing with it, it's time to draw the dimple. So it's basically a 5/8 bolt with some adapters on it. There's a tapered adapter, and then we have a coupler on the outside with a washer to keep it centered, and then a washer for the nut to bear against. All of the parts will be in the description of the video. The first thing I do is lubricate the adapter, because that's going to pull through the stainless and actually form the dimple. So that goes in first, from the inside. Then the coupler goes on the outside, and that holds the stainless in place as the tool is pulled through. Washer goes on to center it, then the big washer goes on, and then the nut goes against that. And now it's just a matter of using my 2 ratchets with 5/16 sockets on them. And we'll just tighten up the nut until the coupler can't go any further. Now again, this steel is a lot lighter than would be in your kegel or kettle, so it goes very easy. But even in something much heavier, it does go a lot easier than you'd think. Alright, we're done. Now we just reverse the ratchets, remembering to reverse both of them, and pull the nut off. As you can see, the adapter is now firmly wedged in the pot. So to fix that, we'll put the 1/2-inch coupler on the bolt and use that to push it out, just like we did before. As you can see, it only takes a couple of turns. Now if this were a heavier gauge kettle, you would have heard the adapter pop out of the hole. So now we have a lovely dimple ready to accept our coupler. It's time to clean it up in preparation for soldering. I'm using 150 grit sandpaper here, making sure to thoroughly sand anything that might come in contact with solder. Now I'll do the same for the coupler, thoroughly sanding the bottom half that'll be pulled through and soldered. Now I'm going to use some acetone, and that'll clean up any sanding residue or oils from my fingers or any other junk or grit that may be in there. We want this joint to be as clean as possible. Now what I'm pointing out here is to make sure that you put the sanded side down, because that's the part that you're going to solder after it's pulled through. Now I apply a little bit of flux to the fitting before pulling it through. This gives me peace of mind that as I'm pulling it through, everything is clean and has been fluxed. I'll be adding more flux later when I solder, but this gets me started. This is Harris Stay Clean Flux. You can't use normal plumbing flux on stainless steel because it won't etch it won't bite. So I've put the coupler back on the bolt in preparation to pull it through. I'll put it back through from the inside, and then assemble it just like I did before. Coupler, washer, nut. So now all we have to do is ratchet again. It'll be a little tight at first, so go slow. But once the fitting expands the steel those last few thousandths of an inch, it'll go pretty quickly. And we're done. Once again, reverse the ratchets, and we should be rewarded with a tightly stuck coupling. Ta-da! Isn't that pretty? Now if you'd like to pull it down just a little bit, you can put the coupler back on backwards and use that to draw the fitting down a little deeper into the dimple. I usually don't go more than a quarter to a half a turn. There, that's enough to make me happy. And now it's time to solder. Be sure your piece is safe and secure and you're wearing safety goggles. This flux is no joke. Now we'll apply flux all around the fitting, making sure it pools in that little gap we have. And now I use a dental pick to push the flux around and make sure it wets every single place that I want solder to stick. I made those rounds of solder you see at the top by wrapping it around the fitting on the outside. Then I snip it off with a diagonal cutters. So we'll slide that right over the fitting, right where we want the solder to be. I'm using a MAPP torch with a remote handle here. I like the remote handle, it makes it very easy to handle. I'm going to start by gently heating the fitting, getting things warmed up a little bit. And I'm concentrating entirely on the fitting, because the fitting is so much heavier than the sheet metal that there's a lot more thermal mass there. And by the time the fitting is up to temperature, the sheet metal will already be there. You can see the flux has already started boiling. Make sure you have plenty of ventilation. Those fumes are very nasty. And there goes the solder starting to puddle. And once the solder is completely melted, we're done. Simple as that. Now make sure you do not move this joint. Don't touch it, don't wet it. Just leave it alone, let it cool on its own. A little cleanup, we're done. You can use a little bit of flux to clean up, or just some water and sandpaper, whatever you like. You can see we have a nice little bead of solder around the outside, showing we got good wicking, and a nice joint.